Morning, everybody. So today we're going to start to go a little bit deeper. Right? Well, when there are certain references made, we're going to actually examine those references, because when you get the primary source, you get a lot more information, and instead of depending on someone else telling us what a third party said, we're going to look for ourselves. So we're going to do a little bit of that today. We're starting, if you're in the English side, you open to page 218. Okay, at the bottom of the page, it's the next to the last paragraph on page 218 if you're working with the English. And if you're on the Hebrew side, it's page Kuf Amud Beis, 100b. And it's the last word on the third line from the bottom. Okay. And here we go. So I'm just going to show you the Hebrew. So this is right there. Okay, everybody have it? So we're continuing a very practical discussion actually today. And these are issues that come up for us quite frequently. For example, in our section of the village, sometimes they'll make a kiddush after shul where people get together in their apartment, and then people go and have their own lunch. So what do I do then? I'm gonna listen to somebody's kiddush, or maybe it's my turn to make kiddush. Then we're gonna eat something. We're gonna make all this brachot, and then we're gonna go to our own house and we're going to eat again. So what do? Do we make the bracha acharona, the bracha after eating, wherever we were, and then start all over again? So these are practical questions. Then what happens in shul? Because if you've been into many different shuls, you'll see there are different practices that are done. Where in our shul in Elizabeth, on Friday night, we used to say Kiddush pretty much the same way as done here. On Motzei Shabbat, for Havdalah, we started at the bracha on the wine. Here, the Havdalah, they start right from the beginning of Havdalah. So they say entire Havdalah in shul, where in most places they do not say the entire Havdalah in shul. So why is that? Why do we do it differently? We'll get into that. So, and then some places they'll say Kiddush Shabbos morning in shul. And lately, if you've noticed, we have not been doing that. We used to do it, we don't do it now. And so why is that all taking place? And so we're going to get some hints from today's Gemara about that. So the Gemara starts, right, the Osam, okay, Osam b'nei Adam, shekitchu beveis hakneses. We did these last few lines last week, but in order to introduce the topic, we'll start from there. Those people who made Kiddush in shul, Amar Rab, so now you have a machloket. And a machloket is an interesting word, because when Nidal and I talk about the Hebrew language, so we always try to figure out what is the root of the word, right? How do we use that word to understand other words? So the word machloket, you have to pardon my handwriting because it's not that great. Machloket, mem chet lamed vav kuf tes, kuf taf, right? So it means a debate, a discussion, difference of opinion. But if you divide it, what is the root? The root of it is chalek, chalach, chelek. And what does that mean? That means my part, my portion, my share. So if you have a machloket, you're trying to stress your side. And very frequently, the way that we get to the truth is through machloket, because we don't want to just accept without questioning what someone says. If it doesn't make sense to us, or if we have a different opinion about it, we have the right to say so, and at least a question. And you're going to see that in the Gemara all the time. That's really the basic system. So here you have Amar Rav. So Rav, remember Rav was that transitional figure. He said, Yedei yayin lo yotzu, Yedei kiddush yotzu. They did not fulfill the mitzvah of drinking wine, but they did satisfy their requirement to make kiddush. Okay? Ushmuel Amar, now Shmuel is in the words of the Gemara in Aramaic, bar plukta means his bal machlokas, the one with whom Rav most frequently is going to be in disagreement. Shmuel says, af yidei kiddush lo yatsu. They did not even fulfill the mitzvah of kiddush if they did it in shul. Okay, so how do they support their position? Each one of them, they didn't just pick this idea out of the air. They're going to tell us what made them say what they have to say. So Ela Rav, lama leila kedusha bevese. So according to Rav, because Rav just said to us that they satisfied what?
Kiddush.
Kiddush. Right, Kiddush but not wine. So if they satisfied Kiddush but not wine, why are they going to say Kiddush at home? They've already satisfied their mitzvah. Okay? So the answer is Kedei lahotzi banav u'bnei beso, because there are people still at home and he wants to make Kiddush for them. Okay?
David, I have a question.
Sure.
What about if you're in shul,
Right.
you listen to the Kiddush, you're going home and you don't have anybody else at home. It's just you and your spouse or whatever that both heard.
Both heard it.
Or a
Okay.
significant other.
Okay. So now, according to Rav, you still need to do it because you didn't satisfy
You have to do the
wine.
bracha for the
Right.
wine.
Right. Okay.
Don't you also need to drink the wine after you say the bracha to fulfill the mitzvah?
Right, and you'll see different things happening in different places. In some places, they'll look for a minor to drink the wine, because after all, bracha was made. And if they can't find one, then the person making the bracha will. Here, we don't look for a minor because there aren't too many of those. And the chazan or whoever's making kiddush will generally take a little sip of it. Some people will drink the whole thing because you have to drink a minimum quantity. So there are a lot of, yes, Rob.
If you make kiddush, theoretically, in shul,
Okay.
then when you come home and you have no one, especially in COVID,
Right.
you're the same person who
Correct.
made kiddush in shul.
Correct.
Is it then a bracha levatala to come home and make it?
So that's a good question, right? Because you have said your kiddush, you've heard the kiddush, now you're going to go home and make the kiddush yourself. So in order to get a little bit of insight into that, we need to look for another source. So the prophet Yeshayahu, Isaiah the prophet, who he prophesied between 619 and 533 before the Common Era, and he's the most popular of all the prophets for Haftorahs. More Haftorahs are coming from the book of Yeshayahu than anyone else. And before Tisha B'Av, we read the famous Chazon Yeshayahu, right? We call that Shabbos Chazon, right? And I read that Haftorah in shul because my mother, just rest in peace, passed away the day before Tisha B'Av. So I get that honor to read that Haftorah. But anyway, so Yeshayahu is coming to give us a little bit of information here. And he's prophesying, he's telling the people what they haven't been doing right, and then he gives them a little bit of instruction of what they ought to be doing. So he says, this is in Yeshayahu, it's in Perek Nun Zayin, right, or Nun Ches rather. So it's chapter 58 and it's verse 13. I'll just read it to you. So in the Hebrew, then I'll give you the translation. So he says, Im tashiv mi Shabbos raglecha. So if you basically stop your daily activity, so you when he says you stop your foot, which means you don't spend Shabbos traveling, and there's a limit as to how far we can walk on Shabbos and so on. Asos chafatzecha, to do your regular needs. B'yom kodshi, in my holy day, v'karasa l'Shabbos oneg, and you call Shabbos oneg, right? So we know oneg Shabbos, right? Sometimes you'll have a Friday night party where they call oneg Shabbos, and some people say shena b'Shabbos tanug, right? Maybe you've heard that. It's nice to take a nap on Shabbos, and oneg Shabbos. So what he's saying here is, and I'll go a little further, and then we'll go back to how the Gemara understands it. Is a likdosh Hashem mechubad v'chibadato me'asos rechecha, to make Shabbos honored, and by that you will be honoring Hashem, right? Mimetzoch hefzecha v'daber devor, and you'll talk about it. He's then tisaneg al Hashem, then you will take joy or pleasure in Hashem. V'yirkavticha al b'masei eretz v'achalticha nachlas Yaakov avicha ki pi Hashem diber. And so then you'll delight in Hashem, and I'll place you on the high points of the world. I'll provide you with the inheritance, the heritage of your forefather, because Hashem has spoken. So what's important in this is that, first of all, we have the word oneg, and we understand oneg to be a happy time, and so we know that there's always going to be refreshments served, right? And then there's the word karasa. You called out, right? So how do you actually do that? So the Rashbam, and if you're looking in the Hebrew, because the English, he gives you this information, but it's basically summarized, so you don't see it exactly. But in the Hebrew, if you're working with the Hebrew, you take a look on the right-hand side of your page.
What page is that? I'm sorry.
So that is page Kuf Aleph in the Hebrew.
Which is what number?
Kuf Aleph, which is basically 201.
So, yeah,
Okay.
so it says 200 and 201.
Yeah. Okay. So if you take a look, and remember we said that all of these are commentaries surrounding the main body of the text. So Rashbam is a grandson of Rashi, and he was writing 11th, 12th century in France, and so he says, you told me in the Gemara that you have to be right, that you have to be making your kiddush at the same place where you're going to be eating, and we're going to get to that right away. So he says, how do we know that? Okay, so just hold that a second. We'll go a couple lines down in the Gemara. We'll go back to him, and we're going to find out what does Yeshaya, what does the prophet have to say about that. So he says, why do we make kiddush in the shul? So we said, according to Rav, because you have other family members at home. Ushmuel. So Shmuel, remember Shmuel says that you don't fulfill either mitzvah, not kiddush and not wine, by making kiddush in shul. Therefore, what is the point of making kiddush in shul? Right? What did you accomplish? Right? You don't satisfy the mitzvah of kiddush. You don't satisfy the mitzvah for the wine. So he says, "Lafuke orchem yedecha vasan," to allow the guests to fulfill their mitzvah. So what guests are we talking about? He says, "V'achlu v'shasu v'ganu b'vei knishta," because they eat, they drink, and they sleep in shul. So, not like today. People were traveling, they got stuck somewhere, and they might actually sleep overnight in the shul. And we're gonna get to that also. Why did they, and why was that permitted? But let's just go a little bit further, and we'll get to Rashbam, and then we're going to get to another reference right away too, because he said, "Az the Shmuel l'tamei," and Shmuel is consistent in his approach, and that's important too, because when we find two statements by the same person and they contradict one another, the Gemara is always bothered by that. So they always want to make sure that they can reconcile statements, that two statements the same person. So they're saying here, Shmuel is consistent because Omar Shmuel, Ein Kiddush ela b'makom seuda. You don't make Kiddush except where you're going to be eating. Okay, and that's an important principle. So now, we say Ein Kiddush ela b'makom seuda. So look at the Rashbam. So he says, how do we know that? Right? He's af yidei kiddush lo yotzu. He's kiddush parshinan, as we explained. This is going, but this is the Rashbam. This is okay. I'm gonna read it to you. So if you're able to follow, you follow along with me. So he says, "Ein kiddush ela b'makom suda diksiv," as it is written, and then the reference is here in the parens, Yeshayahu. So you can see, you can look it up for yourself. You can see that when you see a reference with parentheses like that, it tells you where you can find it and what chapter. Sometimes it'll even tell you what verse in that chapter. So we look at Yeshayahu, which we just did, and it says, "V'karasa l'Shabbos oneg," you should call Shabbos oneg. B'makam shata kore l'Shabbos, in the place where you make Shabbos, where you call out, where you declare that it's Shabbos. Kolomar, to say, Kriya de Kiddush. So how do we declare that it's Shabbos? How do we do that? we make Kiddush, right? So, in a certain sense too, when we greet each other on Shabbos, we say good Shabbos to one another. That's make a declaration too. But the formal way that we declare that it's Shabbos now, even though whether we declare it or not, Shabbos happens, but we declare it in our home by saying Kiddush. Okay, so that's the Kriya to call.
Seudah Shlishit on Shabbat, we don't make Kiddush.
Right, a Seudah Shlishit, no, because we declare Shabbos at night. That's the main one, Friday night, when we declare it's Shabbos by making Kiddush. So now we have taken on the mitzvah of Shabbos, whether we like it or not, it happened.
No, we make Kiddush.
So when we come home from shul on Shabbos, we make Kiddush again, right? But that's not the main one. That one's because we're having this big Shabbos meal. But when it comes to Seudah Shlishi, we don't make Kiddush. That's an interesting question, and maybe we'll get to it. That's a good one. But sticking on our topic that you declare Shabbos by making Kiddush, and then you are to make the Kiddush in the place where you are eating, because why? He's b'makam shata koreh l'Shabbos. He says kriya de Kiddush sham tehei onik. That's where you should be celebrating. That's where you make your Shabbos, your meal, your big party, the place where you declare this. So according to the prophet Yeshayahu, he's saying to us that the place that you should be making Kiddush is the place you're going to be eating. Okay? Therefore, we've got a problem with Shmuel, right? Because we're not eating in shul, right? So how does Shmuel, how does he handle that problem?
I wanted to ask that I'm alone home, and I consider Shabbos when I light the candles.
Right.
So for me, that is Shabbos.
Okay.
I didn't make Kiddush. I don't eat right away. But
Right.
when I light the candles, it's Shabbos.
That's
Is
correct.
that correct? Is that?
That's very correct. And I know that because once in my life I lit Shabbos candles. So, we used to, Mindel and I used to spend our summers on our sailboat, and we wound up one Friday in New London, Connecticut, at a very nice marina, but the water was pretty rough. And by the time we got the boat docked and squared away and everything, Mindel was not feeling well, and she went to lie down, and it became Shabbos, or it was almost Shabbos. So I lit the candles. It's one time in my life I lit Shabbos candles, and I'll tell you, it was a moving experience for me. So I sort of envy you that you get to do that every single week, and that's how you're making Shabbos. So you have the candles is one thing, and the formal declaration of Kiddush is another. So the Rashbam is saying to us that he's telling us it's a well-known statement that we say we make Kiddush b'makam seudah. But why is that? Rashbam is telling you why. He's telling you because Yeshayahu Hanavi, the prophet Isaiah, is explaining to us how we should be observing Shabbos. So that's where we get that from. But now we have another problem. We have a couple of problems. So first of all, we're saying that there are guests in the shul, and they're going to be eating and drinking and sleeping in shul. Is that okay? So maybe it's not so okay, because in the Masechta Megillah, so the Gemara is organized in 6 sets or 6 series. It's called Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. The Mishnah is 6, right? And one of them is called Seder Moed, which relates basically to Moed, to holidays. And they're arranged in an order, right? So it's Shabbos, Pesachim, Yoma, Beitza, Megillah, and so on. So Pesachim comes before Megillah, so we're learning Pesachim, but they learned, this is only like an artificial arrangement. They learned everything, could have been at the same time learning different topics. So they knew about this Gemara that I'm going to read to you right now from the Masechta Megillah, which we happen to be learning in Daf Yomi. But the Gemara says, Bate Kinesios, Ein Noegim Behen Kalus Rosh. We do not act with levity in shul. We're supposed to have respect for where we are. And then it says, Ein Ochlin Behem. We do not eat there. Ein Shosim Behem. We do not drink there. Ein Neosim Behem. We don't fix our hair and makeup in shul. Ve'em Etaylim Behem. We don't just walk around, except when we had our donor tours. We took everybody on a tour to see what the new buildings are going to look like, but it wasn't a shul yet. So we don't. It's not a place where we just idly stroll around. So we don't do all these things. So we don't come in there to get out of the rain. We don't just run into shul to protect ourselves from the rain or from the hot sun, right? And we don't make a eulogy, generally speaking, in the shul for an individual. And one of the things we don't do is we don't sleep in shul. So here the Mishnah is telling us, or our Gemara is saying, that we make this kiddush in shul because there are guests that are going to be there. And another Gemara elsewhere tells us that that's not proper respect for the shul, that you don't have people eating, drinking, sleeping in shul. So we have a couple of problems here. So here we go. We have Shmuel who says that Ein Kiddush Ela B'Makom Seuda. So that's why he says that you don't fulfill your mitzvah by making the Kiddush in shul. Sover Mina, he believes, Hani Mili B'Bayis L'Bayis. Avol Mimakom L'Makom B'Chad Beis Alo. So he says, so they're trying to find a way that Shmuel could allow us to say Kiddush in shul, basically, and because we know that we do that, and also to maybe clarify Shmuel's statement. So he's saying that if you're in the same large room, let's say a room like this size, so somebody's standing over here and making Kiddush, and they walk to another part of the room, you don't need to repeat your Kiddush. But if you're going from one building to another building, or possibly even one room in the same building to another, maybe you need to repeat it. Okay? So how do we deal with all of this business? So he says, Amar Lahu Rav Anan Bar Tachlifa. So Rav Anan Bar Tachlifa says, Zimnan Sakian Hava Kaimna Kame de Shmuel. There were times that went to Shmuel's house, and maybe I was invited there for a Shabbos meal. And what happened was, Nachas Me'igra La'ara V'Hadar Mekadesh. So their roofs were flat roofs, and they used the space. So like in Israel, a lot of the buildings are flat roofs, and they use it. They'll set up, they have barbecues up there, their gardens up there, they use that space. So apparently, in this case, they started the Shabbos meal on the roof. Maybe it was, a nice pleasant evening, and they had the dinner outside. And then he went downstairs, and he made Kiddush again, right? So he went from one location in the same house, but like separate areas, and he made Kiddush again. Right. So they're saying that Shmuel, by observing him, we can see that he's consistent in his approach. Whereas he's saying that you don't do it in shul because you don't satisfy the mitzvah, and then he says that even if you did say it in one place and you're going to be eating another, you have to say your Kiddush again. Then he says, Af Rav Huna Sover. Even Rav Huna believes, Ein Kiddush El B'Makom Seuda. You make a Kiddush only where you're going to be eating your meal. Okay? The Rav Huna Kaddish, and how do we know that he held that way? By how he acted, because he made Kiddush. He had some guests over for Kiddush, and what happened? This Akra Le Shraga, and the candle went out. His wife had lit the Shabbos candles. It was a candelabra, and the light went out. Now he's sitting in the dark, right? So what did he do? Ayale lemane lebei ganane de Rabba bere the Hava Shraga. He went to his son Rabba, who had his light was on. So he went there because why? V'kadesh v'tayim midi, and he made Kiddush again, because now he's going to be eating at Rabba's house, right? So that's like the rabbi who was sitting in his study on a Friday night, and he was learning by the candlelight, and the candle went out, and a certain Eno Yehudi passed by, and the rabbi called him over. He said, Ivan, come in and have a drink with me. So Ivan came in, and he said, no, it's dark in here, Rabbi. He said, yeah, it's dark. So he said, do you mind if I light the candle? He said, no, go ahead. So Ivan lit the candle. The rabbi poured each one of them a drink. They had a drink. So, and Ivan had his drink, blew out the candle, and he left. So that didn't happen in this case, but he went to a place where he knew he was going to have light, because his son apparently had bigger candles, whatever it was, so it lasted longer. And he says, Rava Savar, and Rava himself also was of the opinion, Ein Kiddush el b'makam suda, you don't make Kiddush except in the place where you're going to be eating your meal. Domar Abaye, because Abaye said, Ki avina beimar, when I was at the house of my master, in other words, Rabba was Abaye's teacher, when I was at his house, Ki havim Kadesh Amarlan, when he said Kiddush, he would say to us, Te'imu midi, Dilma ad aziltu lushpize. So Abaye came to visit Rabba, and apparently Abaye came with some other students of Rabba, and they were all staying in a hotel or something like that. There wasn't room for all of them to stay over in one place. So Rabba said to them, I'm going to make Kiddush now, and you should all eat something from my table right now, because when you get back to your place that you're staying, to your hotel or whatever it is where you're staying, it's possible, misakra lechushraga, by the time you get there, the light might be out. And now you're going to be stuck because it's going to be dark. How are you going to be eating a meal? So do it now, right? V'lo mekadesh lehu beis achila, and you won't be able to make Kiddush because there is another principal idea. You should make Kiddush where there's light in the room. You shouldn't be making Kiddush in the dark, right? So that means if it's dark, you could eat there. Maybe that's a certain amount of atmosphere, whatever. But you want to make Kiddush. So he said, listen to my Kiddush, eat something, so you will have fulfilled that mitzvah. Just in case when you go home or back to your hotel, that you're not going to have that issue. And so he says, "V'lo mekadesh lehu bebeis achil." You won't be making Kiddush where you would be eating. And with my Kiddush, if you didn't eat something, you wouldn't have fulfilled the mitzvah of Kiddush because you're not eating. And when you go back to your place, you can't say Kiddush, so it's better listen to the Kiddush, have something to eat. And then the Gemara says, Eini, he says, that's so. He says, Amar Abaye, Abaye said, Kol mili demar hava avid karav. So he said that Rabbah always followed the deen of the opinion of Rav. Okay, now Rav is the one who says, what, that you would have fulfilled the mitzvah Kiddush already, right? But now he's holding like Shmuel, who says you don't fulfill it. So in other words, he's saying to his teacher, to Rabbah, who was like another generation down from Rav, is you always follow the opinions of Rav, who says that you would have fulfilled the mitzvah, and now you're telling me that I should make sure to hear your Kiddush and eat something, because otherwise my Kiddush won't work for you if you haven't had something to eat. Right? You get all the contradictions here. What's concerning him? He's saying that Rav has a particular position. You always, when it comes to a machlokas, right? That's that word with a chelik between Rav and Shmuel. You tend to follow the opinion of Rav. And now you're saying to me that you're taking on the opinion of Shmuel, who says that if I don't eat something, because it has to be Kiddush for Makam Suda, I will have not fulfilled my mitzvah of Kiddush. That's not Rav, that's Shmuel. So you're showing me a little bit of inconsistency here. So he says, yeah. He answers that matirin mibeged lebeged umalikim miner. So he said I accept the opinion of Shmuel except for three things. Lavar mehani plus these three that Shmuel says. Matir mibeged lebeged. That means that if I have tzitzis and the beged, the garment that holds the tzitzis has worn out, or I want to change it or whatever it is, so I'm permitted to take the tzitzis out from the one that I'm wearing and put it into a new one. I can use those tzitzis. Okay? And that there's difference of opinion about that, where Rav and Shmuel disagree whether you can, because some say it's not proper. It's like an embarrassing thing to just take them out and reknot them and all that. Umadlikim miner lener, and you're permitted to light Hanukkah candle from another Hanukkah candle, right? We don't do that, right? We light our Hanukkah candle from the shamash, but apparently there was in the case of Shmuel said that was that was okay. And v'halacha k'Rabbi Shimon begrira. And the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon in grira. Grira is if I do an action on Shabbos, which I do not intend the result of that action, but it's going to happen anyway. So there's a difference of opinion whether I'm chayav for being violating Shabbos or not. And the example they give is their floors were dirt floors, right? They're not like what we have. They had dirt floors in their houses, and so if they had a heavy bench or a stool or something that they wanted to move from one side of the room to the other, they would drag it. And when you drag a table or a bench on a dirt floor, what's going to happen?
Make a furrow.
You're going to make a groove. You're going to make something in the floor. So the question is, you're not allowed to do that, to make a groove or a furrow, because you are then, what's the problem with making a groove, making a furrow? Right? Because it's like writing, and it also falls under the category of agriculture, right? All kinds of agricultural activities are not allowed to be done on Shabbos, and there's a lot of that are derived one from the other, and one of them is making this groove, this furrow in the floor. So they say, well, so there's a difference of opinion whether, well, maybe you can't by yourself. Maybe you don't have somebody to help you. So that's always a practical solution. But I did it already. So then some say that, look, that was enumus kavin. I had no intention of making that groove. All I wanted to do was to take the bench from one side of the room to the other. And then the other one says that is called, I'm going to give you an expression which you probably won't remember it, but if you say it to your grandchildren, they're going to be impressed. It's called a psik reisha v'lo yamus. Psik reisha means if you cut off his head, he's not going to die. In other words, when you're dragging this across the room, whether you want it to happen or not, it's going to happen. So, anyway.
Say it again.
Psik reisha. Psik in Aramaic means is to cut off. Reisha means his head. And then psik reisha v'lo yamus. In other words, you're going to cut off his head, he's not going to die. So, obviously, this is going to take place. Anyway, so he says in these three cases, he holds like Shmuel. So therefore, we still have the problem because this issue of Kiddush b'makam suda, that's not one of the three. So what's going on? Okay, so he says, in terms of so we have moving the bench, b'vajli yiskaven lasos charitz, so you don't have intention of making the groove in the floor. So how can we explain the fact that he is agreeing with Shmuel in this case, right? He's kechumrei de Rav hava avid. So where Rav is stringent, that's when he follows Rav. But the kulei de Rav lo hava avid. But he did not accept Rav's leniencies. So in this case, where Rav says that you do fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush, is that a stringency or is that a leniency? It's a leniency, right? Because you were in shul, you heard the Kiddush, and a stringency, a chumrah, would mean you have to go home and make your own Kiddush. That's extra effort on your part. So he says, I accept Rav's stringencies. In other words, this case of pulling the bench, Rav says, you are chayiv, you have violated Shabbos, where Shmuel says not. So Rabbah accepts that. But where Rav was lenient, he doesn't necessarily follow Rav. So in this case, Rav was being the lenient one. He's saying that my Kiddush that I heard in shul will qualify. And so in this case, it's a different story. Rav Yochanan Amar. So what does Rav Yochanan have to say? His afidei yayin nami yotzu. Rav Yochanan says, not only did he fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush, he also fulfilled the mitzvah of the wine, drinking wine. V'az Rav Yochanan l'tamei. Now, and Rav Yochanan is consistent in his approach. The Amar Rav Yochanan bar Abaye, Amar Rav Padas. So Rav Chanan, the son of Abaye, said in the name of Rav Padas, and these are all Amoraim. These are all like 3rd century or so in Bavel and Babylonia. So he says Amar Rav Yochanan. So they're quoting Rav Yochanan. Echad shinu yayin, ve'echad shinu makom. Ein tzorich levarich. Okay. Now, what does that mean? So I started my meal in one location and I continued it in another. So that's shinui makom. Shinu Yayin means that we started the meal with, I don't know, I'm not a real big expert on wine, but somebody brought us a nice bottle of Zamora on Friday night. And so maybe we started out with that, and then at the end of the meal, we're going to drink I don't know, a sweet wine with a dessert, whatever it is. So do I need to make another bracha? Because now it's a different kind of wine, right? So Rav Yochanan says you don't have to. Now we're getting into the issue of, remember, Rav Huna was upstairs, and then he made Kiddush, then he made Kiddush again when he went downstairs. He didn't change the wine necessarily, but he changed his location, right? So now comes along Rav Yochanan. He says, even if you change your place, you don't have to make another bracha, right? So basically, the Gemara is going to ask a question, and we went to the next page. So if you're in the Hebrew,
In English.
and if you're, where am I? I got my chart kind of mixed up over here. But if you're, I guess that's all I did. I got ahead of myself. Okay, so if you're in the English, you are in
220.
220.
220.
On the bottom.
220 should be on the.
And Rabbi Yochanan.
Okay, so you're on the bottom of 220. And Rabbi Yochanan, right.
Middle.
So he says,
Can I just ask
Yeah, sure.
a technical question?
sure.
On the previous page, you've got, before Matiri Mibega, you've got a little dollar. And you've got a Madlikin in there, and you've got a little hay.
Right.
What do those mean?
Okay.
And the single asterisk, the double
Okay.
asterisk.
Okay, so let's take them one at a time.
Okay.
Where it says Matir mi bega lebega, there's a little dalet, and that little dalet is going to, if you take a look on the top left of the page. So let's go back to that page, okay? Okay, so what she's talking about
Right.
is there's a little dalet right here. So go back to Kuf Aleph in the Hebrew. Okay? If you can't follow the Hebrew, it's okay. But this is a footnote. This is an indication of footnote. So there's a little dalet over
Oh,
here.
yeah.
Okay? And up on top, we have what's called Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah. And what he's doing, I'm assuming it's a he, maybe it wasn't he, but it was a he. What he's doing is he's giving us references elsewhere in the entire Shas, entire Gemara, where this is coming from. So we take a look at the dalet. So he says that's Mehilchos Tzitzis. Okay, so you take a look. This is on the halachos of Tzitzis, and he gives you the location where you can look it up yourself. Okay, and the little hay, because he's got here Aleph Beis Gimel Dalet Hay, his little hay. He says this is in section Pei Dalet Mehilchos Chanukah. Because we're talking about lighting the Hanukkah candles from one candle to another. So you can look it up, and he says to look in the Tur, in the Shulchan Aruch. It tells you where to look. Shulchan Aruch, so it tells you where to look. So to look it up yourself. And I'm glad you asked me that, because next time we're going to do some of that too. Because the idea is that. Pardon? Okay, so if you're looking in the Hebrew, this is Kuf Aleph. And you're going to see in some places a little letter. So what she's pointing out is right over here, there's a little dalet. Is that a little dalet?
Yeah.
Where it says Matirin, right. So that little dalet, that's just not just stuck there random, right?
I thought it's Pasuk Dalet.
No. So that's what this is telling me is it's a reference.
Right.
Exactly right. So this little dalet tells me that I look up here. I look up here, right, in the Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah, and I find the little dalet, right here. And this is going to tell me where I'm going to get more information. It's another source. And remember, we're going to try as much as we can to deal with primary sources, right? We want to dig in. We want to get the facts, right? That's what we're about. We're about truth. So that's. Thank you for that.
Okay, so that's like a footnote.
It's like a footnote, like a reference,
English,
exactly right.
okay.
And there's a little hay a little further along, where it's talking about the Hanukkah candle,
Right.
And so the same thing, so we take a look at that one. Where is it? Oh, here we go, here's the hay. And that hay relates to, it's right there,
Right.
okay? And
And what is that, asterisk?
so the asterisk, okay,
Just below that.
yeah, I see the asterisk right over here.
There's an asterisk with Rosh Omer.
Right, so that's Reb Shimon Omer,
Oh.
right? And it's gonna tell us where, right, if you look right across, it's gonna tell us the reference, okay? Because this is Reb Shimon, and he's talking about making the groove in the floor.
Oh,
And where can we
okay.
learn about that? That is in Shabbos, Masechet Shabbos,
okay.
Daf Kuf Tes Samad Beis.
Oh,
So,
okay.
you know, we can go as deep as we want because we're not under a
I
time
understand, but
restraint.
why do they do like the asterisk in one place and the small olive bet in another place?
Because it's different people.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
different
okay.
commentaries, different authors.
Oh, okay.
So if I want, so what he's doing is he's giving one set of references, he's
Oh.
giving another.
Okay.
And we quoted from the Rashbam, right? So if you take a look at the Rashbam, his opening is in bold print.
Yes,
So that's a quote from the Gemara. And then his statement is in a different script.
oh, yeah,
Okay, it's different script, and it's not bold print. So that's what he's got to say. So that's what Rashbam does, that's what Rashi does. Tosfos does the same thing. And so you're gonna see that they're trying to help us to understand what's going on, and they're bringing their own insights, and they're bringing their commentaries, they're bringing references. So the idea is, and again, this is in this course we're free ranging. There's no such thing as a not proper question. Anything at all is open, and your opinion is just as good as anybody else's opinion. And what we're going to try to do, and we're going to continue to do, is to bring as much primary source material as we can. So when we see references like this, we're going to go there. That's why I need a table over here so I can spread my books out,
Okay.
and we can do that. So how are we doing on time? Okay, so that we're still left.
So a single asterisk goes to the Rashbam.
No, the Rashbam. What the Rashbam does is he gives you the reference. If you take a look at the beginning of the Rashbam, right? So then the first few words are in block letters in bold. Okay, so that is the reference to the text. So you go over to the text, you're going to find these words. It says Afidei Kiddush Lo Yotzu.
Yeah, that's the way Rashi works too, but.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's right on top of
Rashbam was Rashi's grandson, so he learned from his grandfather.
So how do I know where that asterisk is going? Is
You
it
look
going
look right across to the margin. That asterisk relates to right here. See,
Okay, and
the
the
asterisk is
double
there.
asterisk?
There's a single asterisk there.
No, I know, there's a double asterisk coming up on the next page, I think.
Well, then we're gonna have to get to that next time.
okay.
Because we're about out of time, and we're still left with some questions, right? What?
Is
Okay.
there only Rashbam that does this, is actually, right in front of the actual Gemara in Hebrew,
Right?
and then he explains in Aramaic, but is he the only one that does that, do other comments?
His grandfather does that. Rashi does that.
You will see the same format.
Same
as Rashi?
system, right? Tosfos,
Oh, I
which
see.
other
I see.
grandchildren are doing the same type of thing.
Right.
Right.
I see on the other page as well.
Yeah. So there's different. So they're all those three are doing similar. And we're going to get into it next time.
Can I ask you a
Thanks,
question?
everybody. You,
Can
all
I
right.
ask a question?
Sure. What's your question?
Women can,
Not the Kiddush, not the Kiddush.
Pardon?
it's not Kiddush, can women make Avdallah for other women?
Okay. So I'm glad you asked that question because
We'll answer it next week.
we'll answer that one next week. But I
No,
did.
because we need to know.
You need to know. Okay. So I asked.
A huge machloket.
Okay, so we're actually sort of over time, but last week we finished early, so you owe me a few minutes. So no, so I asked Rabbi Yasgur to come up and explain to us what takes place in our shul. Why is it that we make Kiddush Friday night? What do we do Shabbos morning after davening? And so, come on, Rabbi Yasgur, tell us what, explain to us why we do what we
No,
do.
you're not answering my
But
question.
can women?
I'm gonna
make
get to your
Havdalah?
question next time.
Here's Rabbi Yasgur.
Right.
Ask Rabbi
She's a
Yasgur.
magician there, mentions my name and I show up.
Rabbi Yasgur, we have a question.
Hi. So,
Ladies, ask your question.
but the question is about Shabbos morning Kiddush, right?
No,
That was a question that,
no.
You have a good question.
yeah, well, maybe I could address that one
Okay, the
anyway.
question
Sure.
is, can women, a group of women, can a woman make Havdalah for the group of women?
And you would say the
Yeah.
women.
And be Yotzei,
Usually, a lot of women come to my house, and I make Havdalah. But lately, someone said, oh, women don't make for other women. If I want, I can make it for myself.
You know, it is a complex question of who has the obligation. The Rambam holds that in general that kol sheyesh bo b'shamur yesh bo b'zocha, anybody who's commanded not to violate Shabbos is also commanded in all the positive mitzvahs of celebrating Shabbos. So according to the Rambam, women would have the obligation to make Havdalah as well. So not everybody agrees with the Rambam, but there's certainly, that should be fine.
So we can.
Yeah.
We have to make it ourselves.
You have to make it, you don't have to make it. In general, and then I'll use this as a segue to the topic that David just mentioned to me. But in general, we have a principle in halacha that's called shomea ka'ona. That if you listen to somebody saying a bracha that you're also obligated in, or want to be yotzei in, is that, and you listen to it and preferably answer amen to it, then it is as if the person said the bracha himself or herself. So that's why that when, say, if one person makes kiddush around the table, that everybody could be yotzei with that one kiddush. If one person makes hamotzi around the table, then everybody could be yotzei. So it could be that we sit down to a Shabbos meal, and a real meal, it's certainly defined by bread, and on Shabbos a yontiv also by having wine, grape juice, a bori pri agafen, at least in the evening. And you could wind up not making either one of those two brachas. Benching, we do ourselves. Although if a person didn't know how to bench themselves, they could listen to every word that somebody else is saying aloud, and they could be yotzei even with the benching that way as well. So you could actually go through a whole meal without saying a single word of the bracha oneself, and yet fulfill all the mitzvahs, properly.
Okay, but one Havdalah, do women alone have to make Havdalah?
It's a machlokes.
So what?
The difference of it.
You
If it's
have to know.
well, but maybe you have your
It's our
own.
famous word.
Maybe you have your own Kabbalah. If you have, so the shittas of the Rambam is that women, should make or hear Havdalah.
Women should can make Havdalah.
Should hear? No, if there's a man around, so the man would make Havdalah. So I would say yes. Not everybody does, but I would say yes.
Hang on just one second. So
if they hear it in shul, Rabbi, then they're Yotzei
For
with.
Havdalah in shul, yes.
Okay.
But what I want to get to, because I don't know how much overtime we have here. So I take the question. I do want to really address, because I've been speaking to a few women, privately, and I'm happy that there's a group here, and you're talking about this topic.
it's going to be on Facebook and YouTube too, Rabbi.
Oh, hi everybody. So another concept that's very important that you probably studied now is that you're supposed to have kiddush b'makom seuda. That the place that you make kiddush is where you're going to have your meal. Where you're going to have your meal is where you should have kiddush. So in Friday night we make kiddush in shul. That's our minhag. It is the standard Ashkenazic minhag, but not all Ashkenazim do it. In Eretz Yisrael, in Israel, very few shuls do it. But going back a long time in history, is that the shuls had guest rooms, that people slept in the shul if they were visiting or maybe for other reasons. and they would eat in the building as well. So one person would make kiddush for the group. They probably were not so well-to-do. If they were well-to-do, maybe they would have been in there by that they could have paid, to stay. So one person made kiddush for the group, and then they sat down to have their dinner. Eventually, we don't find that practice as common. We don't have a guest room here in the shul, for example. But the basic Ashkenazic minhag continues that practice. That instead of being a practical kiddush being recited for people who are eating dinner, to have it recited in the shul for them, and then they sit down to eat their dinner, it became considered to be part of the davening. So that kiddush, it's like, in a certain way, it's like lighting Hanukkah candles in the shul. We light them because there is an aspect of Pirsumei Nisa, of publicizing the miracle, but nobody fulfills their obligation. Not the person lighting the menorah, and not the people in the shul. We don't fulfill our own personal obligation of what we call Ner Ish Ubeito. There's a different slant to it where you have to have your own house. In Shabbos, you don't have to eat in your own house, but we usually do. So on Friday night, not even the Chazan who cites Kiddush is Yotze with that Kiddush in Shul, because it's not in that category. When there's a young child around, we give the young child to drink the wine. If not, the Chazan drinks the wine. And if one is machmir and they're worried about should we really make the Kiddush or not, so they may drink at least a whole cup of wine, because then you have a big shear, a big measurement, and the Aruch HaShulchan considers it to be like a meal in itself. So it's a one way of dealing with a difficult situation. But because the Chazan is not eating a meal. Now we also make Kiddush during the day on Shabbos. That is a Kiddush midrabanan to give honor to Shabbos, that the Shabbos day shouldn't be viewed to be less important than at night. But we call it Kiddush, but it's not really a Kiddush per se, because Kiddush, where does the name come from? Friday night, or Yom Tov night, when let's just stick with Shabbos though. So Shabbos we have Vayir, Vayhi Voker, Yom HaShishi, Vaychulu. We have an introduction. We say the bracha Bori Priya Gafen. We don't drink it yet. And then we say the bracha of Kiddush. And it's a Baruch Atah Hashem Mikadesh HaShabbat. Blessed be Hashem who sanctifies the Shabbos. So we don't say a bracha of Kiddush. We call it Kiddush because it looks like Kiddush. And in fact, in the Gemara it calls it Kedusha Rabbah, the great Kiddush, which is just the opposite, right? It's a euphemism. It's a small Kiddush. So did you learn this in the Gemara yet? No, okay.
Kiddush Makam Suda, we're right in the middle of that.
Okay. So anyway, truthfully, for a long time, I was uncomfortable with the Kiddush said Shabbos morning in shul, because at the very beginning they just brought out a cup of grape juice, sometimes wine. And then we added cookies to it, so that at least there would be a quantity of mazonos to qualify as a mini meal. But the truth is, the only person that can fulfill their obligation on a Shabbos morning with one person saying a Kiddush and everybody else going home not having eaten in the shul is the person who said the Kiddush. That's Kiddush b'makom su'uda. So if the rabbi gets up and says the Kiddush and has a few cookies to make a kazayas, so the rabbi has had a small meal, and that's fine. But nobody else in the shul has fulfilled the mitzvah of Kiddush that day. And the Kiddush of Shabbos day is this. I forget if it was Rabbi. You'll get up to it soon. But he was invited to a new community, and they asked him to make a Kiddush Shabbos morning, and he didn't know yet about the Shabbos morning Kiddush. So he didn't know what to say. So he started out. He said the bracha Bori Priya Gafen, and then he stalled. He wanted to see if he figured if people pick up their own cups and start drinking, I know I said everything. So that's what he did, and it worked out that way. We add psukim beforehand usually. Some add a lot of psukim, some add a few psukim, some add even less. But the real Kiddush of Shabbos morning, if someone made just a Bori Pri Hagafen on wine or on grape juice, and you could even dilute those liquids to a certain measurement, if you're interested, you let me know. But the whole Kiddush Shabbos morning is just, if you said just the bracha Borei Pri Hagafen, you would fulfill the Kiddush of Shabbos morning. So for people to, in shul, if they sit in shul, they think they fulfilled the mitzvah of Kiddush by listening to Rabbi making Kiddush. They haven't, and it's really something relatively easy to do on people's own to have the fulfillment of the mitzvah. Rivka, and I'm not going to hold everybody up, but when David dismisses you, I'm okay. And if you have questions, I'm here.
When you make a motzi and you don't do bershut, are you yotze the people that sit around you?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what.
Okay,
It's an understood kavana that that's what's happening.
I know that we use.
Thank you, Rabbi Yasgur.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, and see you next time.